A year and a half ago, I disappeared. What happened to me felt like death, but it was only the beginning of the rebirth. This is the story of how everything I thought I was came undone. Welcome, welcome, everyone, to a whole new season of the Rewilding Humanity podcast, a whole new season of my life. It has been a hot minute. I think it's been close to a year and a half since the last podcast came out. And I have been through so much, so much. If you're new here, welcome. If you've listened to the podcast in the past and are a fan, buckle up. There is so much that I want to share with you all. I've decided to launch this new season almost as a trilogy because what's happened in my life over the past year and a half is like nothing short of cinematic, truly. Like I can't even make this shit up. I still on a daily basis reel at what I've gone through and how it has like completely realigned my life. I have a completely different life now. If you were following the podcast prior, I was living in Kelowna, BC. I had just went through, I guess, a bit of a downfall with my previous business, Wild Remedies. So this podcast actually started as the Wild Remedies podcast, and it was something that was created to start a community with my previous company. And for a very long time, that business was purpose for me. And I entered into a portal back in, I'd say, April of 2023. I don't know. Like, I've just been through like the Twilight Zone. So I might jump around a little bit while I'm telling this story over 3 episodes. But yeah, I just want to create a little bit of a backstory so that this makes sense for everyone. So yeah, it was around April 2023. I entered a portal. Astrologically, it was a Pluto square, and more was to come with a couple, 2 or 3, I think it was 3 Saturn transits and then a Neptune transit. And we've talked astrology on this podcast before, and I've always been like, oh yeah, like it's cool and it makes sense and whatever. But like my belief and understanding of astrology now is so solidified because of what I've just gone through. Like like date by date. I use this app. It's called the Pattern app, and I'd love to get the founder on the podcast at some point. I think she's super rad. At that point, the app would literally have, it was almost like peak energy points into transits that are going on for you. They've taken that off the app now, but at the time, there were these peaks. And every time I was reaching a peak or every time I'd entered a new transit, it was very visible in my life and what was happening. So for anyone who is new to this, like Pluto, and I'm not an astrologer, by the way, so I may butcher this, but from what I understand of Pluto, it is basically wiping things out of your life that are no longer in alignment. And it's like a death and a rebirth, which is exactly what I went through. Like I mentioned, I have a completely different life now. I'm currently, if you're watching this on video on Spotify, you'll probably notice my surroundings are a little bit different. I have some art behind me. I paint dead animals now. You'll see my beautiful skull back there. Never in my fucking life did I ever think I'd be doing something like this, but this was part of my therapy and crawling back to life. I'm also in this really beautiful space. This is my sister's home, and I'm in a sunroom that I've converted into a studio, and potentially a little shop. Might be opening it up to the public. We'll see. And it's an indoor-outdoor space. So it's not heated. I'm all bundled up. It's currently, as I'm recording this, mid-April 2025. It's still chilly out because I am now in northern BC, like really north, in a town that I was actually born in. And never in a million years did I ever think that I would end up back in. What am I doing here? It'll become evident as the trilogy goes on. I've met somebody and it just all happened in such bizarre, serendipitous ways, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, back to my birthplace of northern BC in a very small blue-collar town, which is really what my soul was craving before everything in my life burned to the ground. But I didn't think things had to get so dramatic in order to get to this place. But my soul pattern is all about death and rebirth and painful lessons and suffering. And I've talked about this before, and I don't want it to be all about that. But holy shit, that has definitely been the pattern. And I would like it to break. Yeah. I'm over it. I don't know. I don't know if that's something you can when it's a soul contract. But if anything, I'm hoping to pass on some of my experience through this absolute shit show that I've gone through. Okay, so we have a little bit of backstory. And I think where things left off, do I even want to go there? Do I want to go there? Okay, let me preface it by this. So I was holding a lot for a really long time. And I don't think I realized how much. I was incredibly overworked. I was running basically 3 companies. For a couple of years, I was the creative director for a pretty large personal growth company down in the States. I had been running Wild Remedies for several years and got to the point of taking on a whole bunch of business debt and pushing to get my products out into the market in a larger way. We'd gotten into Whole Foods and all of this stuff, and there was just a lot that came with that, as you can imagine. And I also have my design studio, not studio, but freelance business. And so I was holding a lot. And you may know if you've listened before, but if you're new, I've always struggled with chronic health conditions, which I have a lot more light on now, which I'll talk about later in the trilogy. So it was a lot just trying to navigate and basically operate in a very high level, feeling like there was like 1,000-pound weight on my back at all times. And not only that, but feeling really lonely in the process. Like I had a beautiful team who I just adore to this day, but I was alone. Like I lived alone for a really long time. I've talked about in past episodes where I'd been celibate for 5 years before I met my current partner. And I think there's an aspect of that. We know how important human connection is for just health and well-being and mental well-being, emotional well-being. And so that was a big thing that was lacking in my life and something that was a huge longing, but it just wasn't happening, which was really frustrating. And then let's all not forget about just what we've collectively been through for like the past 5 years. I think this is something, it's definitely something that we'll address more in future podcast episodes. But wherever you sat on the spectrum of the pandemic debacle, it doesn't matter. It took a toll on everyone. It's a huge trauma on the system. And that is sitting in all of our bodies still. And that's something that needs to be addressed and worked on because it's just keeps coming at us, right? That hasn't even been integrated. And now we have all of this political stuff that's happening and more fear from the media. And yeah, it makes me feel the need to share my story even more because I feel like what happened to me is going to become more commonplace in the collective. And if I can at least help shine some light for even one person, that's really important for me because what I went through was an absolute living hell. And I don't want anybody to have to suffer the way that I did. Yeah. Okay. So I think I can now start to jump in a little bit more. So we have a bit of a background where I was energetically, physically. I had also been working with a health practitioner for about a year in an alternative way, so a way that I had never worked before. And the work we were doing was really pulling on my system as well, to the point that it was difficult for me to walk down the block sometimes when I was taking the medicine that I was being given. And so that's kind of part of this unraveling for me too. And it's made me realize I've had a huge paradigm shift in how I see the wellness industry, the spiritual industry, all of it. I feel I have a much more balanced perspective on things now than I did before with everything. So I'm going to weave that into these 3 episodes as well. Okay. Now, everything happened. It all started November 17th, 2023 with the question mark. Yeah. Yeah, 2023. And I participated in a plant medicine journey in the Kootenays with some great friends, and I knew I hadn't been feeling so hot just with everything that I had been going through. And so it was decided that I was not going to take a lot of medicine and just participate, not on the sidelines, but just not fully in that way. And what we were actually working on in this group journey was the nervous system and somatics, which is really funny because, well, you'll see later. So just something to note. So I went to go heal my nervous system. And some really bizarre things happened for me during that journey that was very confusing, but this was like a tipping point for me for some reason, and I think it's karmic, astrological. Yeah, I guess it had to happen, but it was really hard, and I'm still integrating. I'm still integrating. At this journey, it felt super safe. And I want to also preface this by saying that I have had a conversation with the facilitators, and it was really great. This was not the type of medicine journey that I'm seeing happen where people are just going and getting dosed on a ton of quote unquote medicine, but it's also fucking drugs. So let's be honest here. And just creating all kinds of dysregulation in people's systems. It wasn't that, but I did have an experience that pushed me over the edge somehow. What I noticed was, okay, let me rephrase that a little bit. So, what I think I didn't know about myself for like ever, the majority of my life, was that I'm actually really empathic. I'm a Pisces moon. And so from an astrological lens, or if you're going to into gene keys or human design, any of that sort of stuff, a lot of my chart reflects that I'm very porous. And I don't think I ever realized that. Like, I remember doing quizzes and stuff back in the day around being like a highly sensitive person, right? And that's definitely something that would always come up, but it just wasn't something that I ever really put a lot of attention into. The plant that we worked with at this journey was Wishuma. And what I now understand about this plant is it's a heart-opening medicine. And I think what happened with me is this plant created an additional empathy. It was like creating empathy on steroids in my system. So what I think happened, even at a very low dose. And the reason I think that is because I physically felt things that I took on from other people in the ceremony. For example, there was one young woman who was going through a process, and she had shared about a lot of the pain that she was struggling with, and there were some themes of like suicide, and she was going through something. And so as a group, as a somatic technique, we put our hands on her. And as soon as I took my hand off her, I felt like this stabbing pain in my heart. And right away I was like, whoa, like that's not mine. I just intuitively knew that that wasn't mine. And I thought, oh, okay, weird. And then just continued on. Not long after, there was another woman who after she had taken her medicine, she got some hives, and not in a dangerous way or anything, but there was some sort of reaction. And we were just sitting in circle, and she was sharing her story and moving through some emotion. And I didn't even touch her. Like, I was just looking at her and empathizing and whatever. And as I'm watching her tell her story, I noticed that I'm scratching my chest. And I look down and I've got bumps, I've got hives on my chest. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm going like, what? What? It's happening. And she finishes like her story and she announces that, oh, my hives are gone and I feel so much better. And I'm just like, huh, okay, this has never happened to me before. And it's probably not good, but okay, whatever. Let's continue. Let's move on. And then a little bit later, and this was like the tipping point probably, but we were doing a process with a smaller group in a very enclosed space. And there was a woman who was going through a very big process. So, like, really big emotions, a lot of screaming and crying, and we're in very close proximity. And as this was happening, my hips just started aching, aching, aching. And for anyone that like understands grief energetically, or if you've taken a yoga class, you'll hear, oh, grief is stored in the hips. And so that's what kind of kept coming to me. And I just felt completely overwhelmed. And I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. And I just ran outside to the mountains. And I did have a facilitator come after me, and she took me outside to go ground and touch the trees and to breathe through it. And I shared what was happening and what I had experienced. And yeah, that was intense. When I came back inside, I just kind of kept my space a little bit. And I spoke to Washuma at that point, and I was like, okay, because I did feel elevated. Like, I wasn't hallucinating by any means. Again, I mentioned that I took a very low dose, but I did feel it in my body, and there was like some overwhelm. And I just asked the medicine, I said, hey, I'm done now. Can we, let's stop. And immediately I was sober, which I thought was really interesting. And I've had big plant medicine experiences in the past where I've been able to communicate with the plant spirit, and it was really beautiful. And for anybody who is new to this podcast, I love I love nature, I love the forest, and I love plant medicine of all kinds. My perspective on plant medicine has changed quite significantly, though, with everything that I've gone through, and that'll be weaved into subsequent episodes because plant medicine comes in so many ways. It doesn't have to be psychedelics whatsoever. So, yeah, I slept that night. I was fine. The next day, some friends and I went to the hot springs, and we were in there for quite some time. And when I came out, I just had the most bizarre sensation. It was like my blood pressure just completely tanked. Or not my blood pressure, like my blood sugar. And I went completely white. I thought I was going to throw up and pass out. And I just felt so off. So this was happening as I was getting changed, and I walked into the lobby, and people looked at me and were kind of like, are you all right? And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, this, something feels really wrong. And I asked one of the friends to drive my car to my Airbnb. And by the time we got there, I was fine. Yeah, it had passed, and I was like, oh, that's weird. So I just, yeah, had a great sleep, got up the next morning. I was going to go to another hot spring, but I felt a little off and I wasn't quite sure what was happening. Went for breakfast. My stomach felt weird. I was supposed to have a call and I canceled it because something was just wrong. And I was like, I want to go home. Had the 6 hour drive home back to the Okanagan. So I got in my car and went home. And that's when the next episode happened. I got home, I went to the sauna, and now we have this theme of like heat, which probably activated it in some sense. But yeah, again, like this very strange feeling came over me. Like the sickness, the drop, like just this drop and feeling so sick. And then the heart pounding. And at some point, I don't know along the way, but new sensations started coming into my body. So, like these tremors on the inside, the shaking, it started out small in the beginning and then it got really significant later down the road. But yeah, at this point, there was a lot of stomach pain, a lot of, yeah, very painful physical symptoms. And this episode lasted about an hour. And I just talked myself through it and breathed. And yeah, it was very bizarre. And as the days continued, everything got worse. So these episodes went from like once a day to getting to the point where my system was just so weak that I could hardly walk. The exhaustion was just something that I have never experienced before. The pain to eat was so bad, and my heart it was like I had tachycardia, like it was just constant. And I the weight just started falling off. I lost, I think, 30 pounds in 2 months. I've gained it all back plus more, which ties into me discovering an underlying thing that I'm now working with, which I'll discuss later. But yeah, it was just very strange symptoms. And I'm messaging the health practitioner that I'm working with, and he's, I don't know, like maybe it's COVID. And I'm like, what? This is fucking COVID, man. What are you talking about? Then I started getting like these really intense, like it was just getting worse and worse. I would get woken up in the middle of the night. I would get these sensations now that were like basically like these intense tremors that would go from my feet all the way up to the top of my head through my central line. And at this point, I'm like, is this like Kundalini energy? Because I was talking about this before I had gone into the journey, and I made an intention that I was interested in waking Kundalini energy. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's an energy that we all have that sits in the base of your spine. And there's yoga practitioners and monks who work their entire lives trying to have these activations. When the energy, when it's activated, it goes up the spine and out the crown, and it basically creates enlightenment. And for some people, it can just happen out of nowhere. I do know somebody that I know a couple of people who this has happened to who were absolutely not spiritual before and had no idea what was going on. And they ended up seeing so many doctors. A lot of people end up in the psych ward. Like, when this started happening, I was just like, oh, fuck, because it can also get activated in a way that it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It can bounce around in all the energy centers. And my spiritual guides still tell me to this day that is an element of what I'm still dealing with. So I think it was many layers of what started all of it. There were energetic reasons that this happened. There were physical reasons, spiritual reasons, and all of it just got to a point that it broke my system. And so for months, like I thought this was something physical. Like I said, there was like a lot of physical pain. A very strange symptom too that happened was I was losing my voice. So, yeah, it was so strange. I could barely speak. I could, but it was very quiet. And it was just very strange, very strange. So this had been going on for, let's see, November, December. January was when everything got really bad. And in that 3 months, I went to Mexico while I was in the state. And I wasn't even nearly as bad as things got so much worse. But yeah, I went to Mexico. I had some spiritual guidance around it, and that I just needed to connect with the sun. I hadn't traveled since before COVID out of the country, and traveling is a huge thing for me. Like, I used to be a nomad. I have lived all over the world. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna do this. There was a lot of unknowns, but I just decided to go to Puerto Vallarta. I lived there for a few months and I knew people, so it felt safe. And I was slowly starting to get better. There were, like, it took a while. I had to be very mindful. I couldn't walk very far, but I just went to like rest, be on the beach, connect with the plants, and it was working. I was getting better. And then I got hit with a virus or something. I got a cold and it freaked me out because I was like, oh, fuck, like, what if it's something more? Like, my system's already so taxed. I don't know if I can handle this. And it took a huge toll on my system again and just drug me back down. So I decided to leave early, which I've never done ever on a trip. And I just wanted to go home and I needed like my family. I called my mom and she was like, just come home and let me take care of you for a little bit. So that's what I did. And now we're creeping up close to Christmas time. And my grandma gets really sick. So she ends up in the hospital and I'm just like struggling to cope with all the things. My symptoms are getting worse. It's now been like 2 months of being sick. I don't understand what's going on. I'm losing all of this weight because I can't eat. My symptoms are getting worse. I'm starting to get more weird symptoms. It's wild. I can't work. I can't do anything. And then just the stress of watching a family member be sick was really difficult too. And I actually ended up staying a lot with her. I couldn't be alone. So I just needed to be around family all the time or someone. Like, my safe person was my mom. And oh God, that was such a difficult time. Like, just being on the couch every single day. And all the advice was just to rest. And I'm like, how do I rest anymore? Like, why isn't this shifting? Why isn't this changing? Why am I still so sick? And in my mind, I'm going over and over, like, how did this happen? Why is this happening? Like, how do I fix this? I had no relief. And things were just getting worse and worse. The tremors were getting worse. My vision was starting to get affected, where it was like glitching out. Yeah, I was in and out of the hospital a few times. They did blood work. They're like, you're fine. We don't know what's wrong with you. And I'm like, how? I'm so sick. Like, how is there nothing wrong with me? This makes no sense. I went to go see my health practitioner and he did some testing or whatever. And he's, yeah, every organ in your system is completely taxed right now. And I'm like, makes sense considering can't eat. I've had tachycardia constantly for 2 months. I just feel like I'm dying. I like, what is this? Like, why am I shaking on the inside? Like, why is this stuff happening? Probably at this time I started getting like some muscle twitches, which got a lot worse. But yeah. And the not knowing and the continuing to go to the hospital and getting no answers just made things worse. And I got to a point, and this is around January now, where my body, my system got into a state of, I don't even know what it is. I had somebody explain it to me later, but it was just like I wasn't in a psychotic state because I could understand everything that was happening around me, but like my entire nervous system had basically been blown up. So like I was so energetically wound up that like my body was just trying to function, but it couldn't. So like I was gagging while yawning. I It felt like bugs were crawling all over my skin. I couldn't sleep. I had bleeding gums. My vision was freaking out. I started getting like entire muscle groups on my body would shake uncontrollably, like twitch. I had, it felt like things were pushing and pulling on my body. So, like the top of my head, it would feel like somebody was pushing. I'd have like my chest, like somebody was stepping on my chest, but not in a way that it was like anxiety or whatever. Like it physically felt like there were like entities or something, right? I couldn't regulate my body temperature. I could hardly walk. I had like these crazy spasms, like in my groin, down my leg. I couldn't handle sights and sounds. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't drive. I was so weak, I could barely lift my arms. Like, it was a big day for me to be able to make it down the stairs to get into the bathtub. Like, having a bath was like, holy shit, I did that today. I would get like burning all over my body. And sometimes my system would just shut off. Like, I would just be like laying there. I'd be so exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. And then my body would just shut off. And then I'd wake back up. And like I would have all of these terrifying visions and things that would go through my mind. What? Like the heart palpitations I got were so bad that like I could literally hear them. I could hear my heart squish. To have constant tachycardia for like months on end, like I can't even tell you how horrifying that is. So I got to this point where I was just so messed up, and I was divinely pointed to a woman who's a somatic therapist. And it's so funny because I had met her like many years ago. I'd done one session with her, totally forgot about it, and connected with her again. And it took 2 days for me to be able to see her. So for 2 days, I was just in this like, it was almost like psychosis. Like it wasn't, but I was just, I didn't know what was going on. Like my eyes were rolling around in my head, basically. Like I'm gagging and yawning. And like it was just absolute fucking insanity. Absolute insanity. I go to see her and I basically just collapse into her arms and sob. And she gets me on the table and she starts manipulating my body in these interesting ways, working with my feet, working with my limbs, holding certain parts of my body. And she actually got me out of that critical state. Didn't last long, unfortunately, but it did work for a bit. And I had the first bit of appetite that I'd had in months, and I was able to eat some food after my session with her. So that was like miraculous. And I was like, holy shit. So at this point, like now I'm really understanding that it's the nervous system because like I didn't know for the longest time. Like I thought it was physical. I thought that I had a parasite. I thought, I don't know, like all of this shit. And I've had instances in the past where, and this might sound crazy if you're just listening to this podcast for the first time, but if you've been following for a while, this has happened before. But I've been in plant medicine journeys where energetic parasites have attached themselves to me. And so that was going through my mind, but the spiritual advice that I was getting was like, no, you don't have anything like that this time. But I end up going down a rabbit hole eventually with this too. Yeah, after seeing this woman, it was almost like my body, I don't even know. Now it was almost like I was very flimsy and weak, and my body started just automatically discharging trauma. And what that looked like was my arm just involuntarily jerking like this. I have a video of it. I'm gonna post it. Oh my God. And I was just like, what? What is this? Like, what the fuck is this? What do you mean my arm just like jerks now? What? What? And she's consoling me and being like, no, this is a really good thing because, this trauma is coming out of your body. And I'm like, okay, but it's just one arm that's doing this. We continue to do sessions. I spent thousands of dollars and doing sessions, being told that this was the only thing that was going to help me. And this is the best thing for the nervous system. And I kept going, and I would feel better for an hour and then it would all come back. We did make some progress where, in quotations, where the jerking from the one arm was now two arms, which I was told was good because now it's like a pattern and it's like more balanced. So when my body was incredibly like stressed or whatever, like this jerking would happen. What? What? And in my mind, I'm just like, you know what this is? I am like one of those kids that you see on TV, which is like absolutely disgusting that they like showcase this. Like those commercials where it's like they're showing a kid that just went through war or something and they're all like fucked up and twitchy because like they're extremely traumatized and they're just like staring into space and they're like, yes, give us money for these poor children. That is the state that I was in. It's insane. Like the amount of horror of not knowing and months of being like so sick and then whatever. And like now my body's just like, what the actual fuck? And I was prescribed to take these baths, like these energetic baths with salts and whatever. And so I'd spend 2 hours in the bath if I could get down the stairs that day. And I would lay there and float. And my body would just like jerk uncontrollably, like being held in the water. And I prayed to everyone and anything that would listen. I'm not a religious person, but I was praying to Jesus. I was praying to Mother Mary. I had people that came into my life around that time who were just like, oh, you're probably possessed and you need Jesus. And I'm like, what the fuck? So that just threw me down a whole like freak out, right? Like, I'm just like, I don't even know. I don't even know. Oh, those baths were intense. I got to the point where I got scared of the bathtub. I was scared of the bathroom, actually. Just even being in it was traumatic. which is wild because I'm normally like a very confident woman who just goes out into the world and does all the things. And I was transformed into an invalid. Like I was clung to my mom like a little kid. I was scared when she left the house. Getting through one day in this state, what it was like a year. Every day was like a year of just pure hell. I don't know what my body was doing at this point. These baths that I was taking, at one point I noticed I would get out of the bath and water would start pouring out of my body. I don't know what was happening, but like my root chakra was being held open. So water was coming into my body while I was in the bath. And it was just like what? I my root chakra would buzz really intensely as I was trying to fall asleep. So like this buzzing, this energetic stuff, the bugs crawling on me. It felt like I could literally feel like things crawling on my head. The internal tremors got to a point, it was so bad. It was like it was like having a seizure on the inside. Oh God, just the constant sensation. The constant sensation was just absolutely insane. And then I started getting information around the nervous system and like finding communities of people where like this was happening to them too. And this can happen for so many different reasons. So like it can absolutely be like a spiritual Kundalini awakening thing. It can absolutely be from being sick, right? When people talk about having long COVID, this is a variation of this. It's a nervous system issue. Their chronic fatigue syndrome. There's an element to this. Lyme disease, just too much stress, burnout. All of these things that I'd heard of, and I'd never heard of what had happened to me. And I think a lot of people, like, I list my symptoms and they're like, what the fuck are you actually talking about? What? This is actually commonplace. And this is why it's so important for me to talk about because I'm like, shit. Like, with all of the stress and trauma in our systems, this is just going to happen to more and more people. And folks need to know about it because most people like me and like the people that I connected with ended up, some of them years before figuring out what the hell was going on and being able to get the help that they need. And the help and like fixing this shit is not fucking easy. It is not easy. It's brain retraining and forcing yourself out into the world when you don't want to, and fucking medication, which you guys know I'm like, was against, but it saved my life. And yeah, there's so much more to unpack there. But basically, at this point, I've just lost everything. My parents had to pack up my house for me. I wasn't working. I couldn't work. I had lost Wild Remedies. I had to lose my home. And when I did lose Wild Remedies, I had to basically go bankrupt. Like, it wasn't a full bankruptcy, but a consumer proposal. I had lost my health. I had lost what felt like my sanity. I lost my community, my friends. When you're sick like this, nobody comes to see you. Just FYI. And for a while, I wanted that connection, but then it got to a point where like I didn't want anybody to see me because I was just a shell of a human being. And so that was just fine with me for a while. Yeah. I think I'm going to leave it there for today. We're at an hour. There's still so much. Next time, I thought I had already descended as far as I could go. Shit gets like wilder. Like my reckoning hadn't even started yet. On the next episode, I'm going to talk about one of the angels that helped me, just some of the insane shit that I tried to heal, and then eventually ending up in the psych ward. Spoiler alert. And then what started pulling me back to life. So if you've made it through this episode, thank you. I hope you listen to the next one and the next one. And my goodness, the people that I'm going to introduce you to after this trilogy and the alignment is just gonna blow your mind. Blow your mind. So I know it's all like dark, scary stuff, and it's gonna be for like a little bit longer, but then it's just like the most magical shit ever. Like, my life is just so... You'll see. You'll see. So thank you. Thank you for getting this far, and I hope to see you on the next episode. If this episode cracked you open, good. Share it far and wide so we can reach more people who are done pretending and ready to come home to themselves. To dive deeper into my world, explore Wildcrafted Apothecary and Sacred Art at magicmaven.com. Discover new tools for nervous system healing at mindfulmeds.io and Alchemy. Or bring your vision to life with me at the Brand Bruja. All the links and more are waiting for you in the show notes. Until next time, stay wild, stay rooted, and remember, you were made for this.